Hello and welcome back to our PHP Framework tutorial. So in the last video we started building our service scanner, and in this video we'll aim to finish this one and see it in action. What we already did last video is find all the classes in our namespaces. And now that we have all our classes, we can loop over them. And how we are going to loop over them is with a for each. So scan classes as scan class. And we want to filter, we want an array of service classes. We'll initialize this one. And this is what we will return. So we'll return service classes. The only thing we need to do is to fill in our for each to add service classes to this array. So first, what we want to do is to see if we have service attributes on this class. So attributes equals scanned class get attributes service, and we need to pass in instance of is instance of. So what the second parameter does, if we extend our service class, then, and for example, we'll call it repository, then those repository annotations are also service attributes that we found, and we can inject them. That's why we use instance of. Otherwise, it will only look for real service attributes. So we will have a service attributes count, because when we want to do it once, it's just a simple count of our service attributes. If our service attributes count equals 0, we don't have anything that we can do. This class isn't a service, so we skip over it. If our service attribute count is bigger than 1, we want to throw a new exception. So throw new service scanner exception with message to service with class, and we'll say scan class get name. Let's put it some single quotes as well, as multiple service attributes a service can only have one. So I think it's really clear that that we only have one service on our class. If all those basic checks are passed, we want to add it to our to our service classes. So our service classes, we want to return an array of service injection info. So we need to build our service injection info object. So we'll have a new method, build service injection info. And what does this method need? This method needs a scanned class. And then we will create a array utils class as well. And we want get first element with the service attribute. So we want the first service attribute. We know that it's only one, but to make the code quite safe, we'll add this class and helper method. Good. So let's create our array utils first. So new PHP class, array utils. This can be a read-only class, a final read-only even. We will have a private constructor, so function construct. So we cannot instantiate this one, and we'll have a method public static function get first element. We will have an array called array. What we want to return is mixed. So if our array is empty, we return null because there is no element. Otherwise, we return. So we get all the values and an array. And then we say we want the first one. So what does this do? Even if we have an associative array, we say, okay, we just want to have the array values where the first key is the index 0. And then this one returns always the first element of an array. Okay. Now we need to import this class and it works. Okay. We need to also build now our service injection info object. So let's go to the bottom and this private function build service injection info, which accepts a reflection class. Let's call it class, and a reflection attribute service attribute. What we return is a service injection info object. So in the last video, created a builder for this. So we'll create a new instance of this builder. Here it is. And then we say return builder a build. Done. And now what we need to do, so we need to say with class, we pass in our class with injection name, which we will create a small function for. Get injection name. We need to pass in the class and the service attribute with service attribute class name. So this is quite easy. We say service attribute get name. So we want to know what service attribute class we really use. Again, if we use a repository annotation that extends service, we want to have the full name of that repository annotation and not of the service. For later on filtering and auto-injecting some things into it. We will also need to say if this is a primary or not. And we'll also create a small method for this one as primary attribute, and we'll need to pass in the class. That's it. That's the method we need to create. And then we have with constructor arguments, which we also need to build. So we say get constructor args. Let's call it injection arguments, and we need to pass our class. Okay. First things first, our injection name. So private function get injection name, which returns a string and accept a reflection class. So reflection class is called class and a reflection attribute service attribute. Okay. Quite easy. So first things first, we need to instantiate our service attribute. So we'll call it service equals our service attribute new instance. This one will return then a service, and our service is our attribute itself. Then if string utils is blank, then we say service name. So we'll check if this one is blank. If the name is blank, we'll say return the name of our class. So if we leave it empty, it will just print out the full name, and that's our injection name. Otherwise, we want the name we use. So we say service.name. And this will not be null because we check it in our isBlank method. Okay. Next up, our has primary attribute. So private function as primary attribute, we have our reflection class. It's called a parameter class, and this returns a bool. How will we check this? So again, like we saw before, we need to get the attribute. So attributes equals class get attributes of, this time primary class, and is instance of again. If they extend it, we'll have it as well. And then we say return if we have a count of our attributes that's bigger than 0, then it is a primary, and that's okay. This one, it can be multiple times, it will not affect anything this time. Now we have another important one, which is the constructor injection arguments. So private function get constructor injection arguments, which will have a reflection class parameter called class, and we return an array. And in this array will be constructor injection args. By a quick recap, what's in there, it's the reflection parameter, the constructor injection type, and a qualifier or not, and that's it. But then for every parameter in that services is constructor. But we'll see how to use this the services later on. So let's start build it. We want our constructor. And how do we get it with reflection in PHP? PHP is just get constructor. Easy enough. If our constructor is null, we return an empty array. It doesn't have a constructor. We don't need to inject anything into this one. Otherwise, we want an array. Let's call it args. And that's what we will return. We need to loop again. So over what do we want to loop? In our constructor, we want get parameters as parameter. So the parameter is a, as you can see, reflection parameter, and it contains all the info and attributes we need. So we say args, we'll add this build constructor injection argument, and we'll pass in the parameter. Let's create this method, add method. We need to add a return statement, constructor injection argument, and again we had a builder for this one. So we'll create our builder. Constructor injection argument builder. Return builder.build. And what do we need to fill in? First things first, we say with parameter. So that's the parameter with type. And we'll create a function for this one to find our constructor type. Get constructor injection type. And we need to pass our parameter. And what else do we want? Our qualifier or null. And we also need to, well, we also build this one in a small function. Injection qualifier, and we need to pass in our parameter. So let's create those methods quickly. This one will return a string or null, and our type, we need to add it above, will return a constructor injection type. Yes. Okay, let's implement the injection type. So we have a special attribute called property, which is used to inject config into our service. And we want to distinguish if this is used. We have done it already here. So we'll copy paste it for now. And then we of course need to put in the parameter here, property. So we get the attributes of the parameter with the instance of again if our attributes are empty. We return the type bean because it's just a bean. A bean is a service. Otherwise, we return that it is a property. And that's what this method does. Just returns one of the other type. Now for the qualifier, basic, we need the attributes again. Qualifier. If it's empty, attributes, we return null because we don't have any qualifier. That's fine. Otherwise, we say array utils get first element of our attribute. So we have the first attribute. We need to do a new instance of this one. We saw that method before, and then we want a name again. So as you can see, our qualifier has a name. And if we use the qualifier annotation, you always need to put in a name. And that's it. Our service scanner is done. Next up is to see how will we use this. So we need to now go for the first time to our example usage. And in our public folder, I will create a new file called index. First things first, we need to load in composer. So we say require dir name __ dir. We append vendor autoload.php. We need our PSR4 mappings as well. So let's duplicate this line and we say here PSR4 mappings equals vendor composer and then autoload PSR4. And what's in that file? It's just this array, which is our PSR4 mapping. After that, we can instantiate our scanner equals new service scanner. Later on, this code will move to its own module, but for now, to test it out, this is the easiest way. We need to import it. And what do we need to pass? We need to pass our PSR4 mappings and an array of what we want to scan. And to show you that we're really not just scanning a full namespace that's inside the autoload PSR4, we will say that we will scan services. So we only will scan the services folder in our source. After that, we can say scanned services. We will use our scanner, and I see I have a typo. Scanner scan. And that's all our services are in this variable. To see this, let's put a for each. Scanned services, of course, as scanned service. And then we var dump that scanned service. So we loop over all our scanned services. Okay. So now we need to create some test services to see if it works or not. So let's do this one quickly. So we'll create first a new folder called services because that's where we want to test it out. Well, where we want to scan. So we create a PHP class and let's call it service1. Edit. So we'll add our service attribute and we'll give it a name called service1 name. That's a good test to see if we can load in this name. We'll create, of course, another service called service2 and we'll use no name for this one, just service. But let's give it a constructor this time with our attributes to test it out. So a public function underscore construct. What's something we want to test? We want to test our qualifier. So our qualifier, and let's put in the name service1 name. So if we start with our real injection, means that we can test it out already as well. So service1, service1. What else do we want to test? We want to see if it scans just a normal a normal other service. So let's create a third service, but let's put it in subfolder to see if it scans recursively. Let's call it service one, well, subfolder service one. Let's add it. Of course, we need to add the service attribute. Then we can see if it detects this one as well. So we want to inject subfolder service one. We'll call it subfolder service one. What else did we have? We have a property, which also has a name, and let's call that name hello.world. Property injection will also be something else. It will come from configs, but let's just say it's a string hello world for the parameter name. What else do we have? We have a nullable. And let's create a model for this one. So create another package model, which will not be scanned. And let's create just a empty PHP class test. That's all it is. Test one equals null. So it has a default value and is nullable. Test or null. So the other way we want to test as well. Test2 equals null. And then we have a not nullable string with default equals with default. And I want to change this like this. So there we don't have any injection, but our injection engine needs to know, it's null, and we don't have a default value. I really need to inject null into it. In this one, it has a default value. That's already okay. The same with this one, and we need to detect if it's if it's it has a default value. Okay, so now we want to run our index.php so we can see our var dump, of course. So I'll create a building web server. I'll just call it web, and I always choose port 8000, and our document root is, of course, framework public. Okay, let's apply it. Looks good. Run. Okay, so now it's running and we have a error. What is the error? On line 85, string utils. Not found. Okay. I think I just need to trigger an update. I already see what's wrong. We put in everything separately, but what we can do is just add a star. Same for the starters. Then we only have 2 repositories. Let's update. And I think we're good now. Let's see. I think we also need to try restart. Okay, we still have the same issue. It's not found. Okay. Is this... Okay, yeah, that's another thing, of course. We also need our repository in here because we are using it. Let's update. And we still have the same issue. So that's the fun part of debugging all the time. So my IDE knows it. Did I add it? No, it's also not in my requirement. So PHP-Boot /utils at dev. So let's update again. Okay, we still have the same issue. What is going on? Okay, our example usage update. Yeah, now we're getting somewhere. This looks already better, but we still have the same issue, but it's another one. Okay, so it now says could not find any PSR4 mapping for namespace up services. Was there a typo? So this is an error that we created. Let's check out what did we do wrong. So we have our PSR4 mappings, but it didn't find anything. So the first thing to do is to log our PSR4 mappings. So say PSR4 mappings, and we'll die the script there. I will show you as well my browser. Okay, so what do we have? We have web, we have HTTP, PHP-Boot, DI, and app. So that's correct. That's what we expect. And now we need to find out why it doesn't find our app services. What are we doing? If it starts with, it doesn't start with namespace, we continue. Yes, that's correct. So we check if our key starts, our namespace starts with that part. So what's happening here? Let's see what it now will print out for. Well, let's die before the exception so we have something that shows them. Okay, so we have app, which is correct. And what is our namespace? Which is also okay. So that's our namespace. Our namespace. So why isn't it? Okay, key namespace, key namespace. Okay, our namespace starts with a slash, but it should. Okay, I see what we need to do. Wait. Hmm, why is our namespace with a slash in the beginning? Okay, we use this. Oh, we forgot to implement one small method, which is also, well, it's an important one. Okay. It will no, but we already crashed before it, so it doesn't make sense. So scan namespace in base namespaces. Bum, bum. So we want to loop over them. Okay. Say find, add trailing. Then we have PSR4 mappings. It starts with that one. And our namespace, we have a slash in the beginning, which is not what we want. Okay, it's just this. And now we can continue. But we also found another issue. That's okay. Now it will not throw an exception normally, but just have an empty array. Okay, we still have an issue on line 77. Ah, okay. Of course, we don't have a return. So we say return classes. We have our directories. Now we will loop over them and have an array of classes that it scanned. So scanned classes equals array merge. Scanned classes. I will create a new class called file scanner. And scan for classes in namespace. So that's the namespace, the directory, and we want to have it cursory. Okay, let's first of all create the file scanner class. Create class. It can be a final read-only class. And of course, we need to create our method in this one. Add the methods. Okay, good. Which will return array. And what is the array? The array is of type reflection class. What will this small class do in this function? So we'll have a classes array. Okay, good. And that's what we want to return, classes. And we have our namespace equals rtrim namespace. So we want to trim off our last backslash. For each new directory iterator, which is a PHP class, import it. And what does this need? It needs our directory. And then we want the file info. So first things first, if our file info is dot, we don't want to do anything. We just want to continue. It's a special thing in Unix systems. We just want to move over it. If we have our recursive, oh, this needs to be bool recursive. So if we want to go recursively and our file info is a dir, we need to have the base name, and to get the base name is file info get base name, and we have a variable new namespace because that's the new one we want to scan. We have namespace, and we'll append a backward slash to it, and then the base name. Then we say classes equals array underscore merge with classes and self, and we call this function again with new namespace with the directory which is file info get real path, so we get the full path, and of course if we are in this one we want to have it recursively. Otherwise, if the file info is a file, then we want to add it to the classes array as well. So we have a base name, file info get base name, and we want to trim off our PHP extension. Then we say class equals the namespace we have, and we append the name of the class, so our base name. Now we say try with our classes. Okay, and we'll try to add it. So new reflection class. So if the class doesn't exist, it will throw an exception, which we will catch. Reflection exception, call it X. And for now, we cannot do anything yet, but we will put a to-do, log a warning. We need to import it. No. We need to import this one. So it skips over the classes. It cannot create a reflection class off, so we don't break everything if something goes wrong in the scanning. So now we have our scanned classes. Now we need to see we have our service classes. And I don't see why IntelliJ is complaining at the moment. So we have our scanned classes, scan, yes, get the attributes, account, 0, continue. If it's bigger than 1, we throw the exception, we build it. Oh, now of course we need to return service classes, not scan classes. Okay, great. Thank you, IntelliJ, for noticing. Let's see what it did. And as you can see, we now have nice. We scanned the services. So service 1 is scanned. In our subfolder, it is scanned. And you can see the injection name and class name. For service 1, the injection name is just service 1 injection name. And service 2, of course, has our constructor arguments, which is 6, which is correct. So the first argument, it's a type of bean because we want the service injected, and we have a qualifier. Yes, that's correct. Then we here see we have a property, and the rest are beans, which is also good. So this was our scanner, which is now working fully. Now we can start working on injecting those things into each other. Okay, sorry, my headset powered off. It just, yeah, we'll build it, and we will need to write some validation to see if we circular dependencies, or if we have things that cannot be injected. So we will have a validator, and then we need to have the injection order. So in this example, service 1 needs to be created before service 2 because service 2 depends on service 1. And that's just, yeah, also our subfolder service 1 needs to be created before service 2 because service 2 also depends on it. So that's also a fun part of writing our dependency injection. But for now, the scanning is done. We can put in as much namespaces as we want and as much classes we want. It will still work. Thank you for watching, and hope to see you guys in the next video. Bye bye.